Hello, and welcome to this joint webcast of eSchool News and eCampus News. My name is Andrew Barber, a Senior Contributing Editor, and I'll be acting as the moderator for today's presentation, which is sponsored by Printer Logic. It's titled, Oklahoma City Community College Eliminates Print Servers and Simplifies Printer Management. Before I introduce our two speakers today, I want to take a few moments to highlight a couple of items. First, today's event will be recorded. In a couple of days, you'll receive an email from us containing a link to the recorded event, and you'll also be able to download a PDF of the presentation from that same email. And secondly, please ask questions. Don't feel as if you have to wait until the end. At any time during the presentation, if you have a question, just type it into the question and answer box on your console and hit the send button. I hope we'll have maybe 10 or 15 minutes at the end when our speakers can answer your questions. We also have a chat function which can be launched via the brown group chat icon at the bottom of your screen. Use the chat to talk among yourselves or to contact me or our team with any technical issues or other concerns that you may have, but please don't use the chat function to ask questions of the speakers. They will not have time to monitor the chat. So if you have a question, again, please use the Q&A panel instead. And so without further ado, let me introduce today's speakers. John Gibbs is head of Printer Logic's Education Account Team. He works closely with school districts, community colleges, and universities to solve the complex issues associated with printing. He's empowered hundreds of IT professionals to eliminate print servers, enable mobile printing, significantly reduce print-related help desk calls, simplify print management, and much more. Our other speaker is Steve Kelley. With more than 5 years' experience as a network engineer and systems administrator, Steve is a system engineer at Printer Logic. He works directly with Printer Logic customers, helping them to eliminate their print servers and centrally manage their print environment from a single administrator console. In his spare time, Steve is a member of the Utah Army National Guard, for which we thank him profusely. So now that you know something about who's behind the voices, let's get started. John, you have a lot of experience in both the K-12 and higher education market. Can you, just to get us off and going, can you give us a sense of what the biggest issues are facing these institutions when it comes to printing?
Absolutely, yeah, we can talk about that. Some of the things that we see in both K-12 environment and also higher education is we speak with customers on a daily basis. Many people, we talk to them, and these are some of the things that they see and some of the issues that they struggle with. So as you can see here on the left-hand side, we have some challenges and then some solution trends or things that they're looking to potentially implement at some point. So of this list, the first one that sticks out is driver management. We find that pretty much most of the organizations that we deal with struggle with driver management, being able to deploy drivers out in an efficient manner. Also, we see a lot of issues around printer installation. For example, getting printers out to end-user workstations and doing it in an automated way is definitely something that we see folks struggle with. Also, another one, for example, is in the virtual environment, of being able to get their hands around printing in a VDI environment is something that we see. On the solution side, one of the things that we see on the education side that folks struggle with is the ability to allow end users to self-install printers on their own. We find that there's a lot of help desk calls around people wanting to install a printer, moving from location to location, and at the new location not knowing how to set up printing there. And so the ability to allow them to self-install printers is a big trend that people are looking for help with. Also, reporting. We constantly talk to both K-12 school districts, universities, and pretty much we find that most of the folks we speak with really struggle to get their hands around what is being printed in the organization, how much, who's doing the printing, and that's a piece that is definitely something that they struggle with. Also, in the SNMP monitoring and alerting, people want to see where the potential issues are in their environment with printers, and also they want to be alerted so they can solve the problems before they actually become problems for the end users. And then the big one, and the one that Steve and I are going to spend a lot of time talking with today, is around mobile BYOD and guest printing. We find that a lot of these folks are getting a lot of mobile devices, iOS devices, Chromebook devices in that K-12 space, and a lot of BYOD devices in that higher ed space where they need to be able to print, and IT is really struggling finding cost-effective ways to allow printing in those environments. So what is actually complicating printing in education? Well, we find these things. It really depends on the organization. Every organization that we deal with is different, and they all have unique and interesting problems that they need to solve. Mobile devices, as I mentioned, it's a big problem. We find with a lot of the school districts, they invest in Chromebooks and iOS devices, and the plan is for them not to print, and then as they get into the rollout, they find that, oh, we absolutely have to print, and people are scrambling to find solutions to be able to do that with. Not enough resources. We find IT staff in both the K-12 space and higher education are taxed. There's not enough resources to be able to get their hands around solving all of the problems that IT faces in these environments. And then also budget. Obviously, there's a lot of very good solutions out there that people can implement, but a lot of them aren't cost effective and they don't fit within the constraints in education. We find that a lot of times we see shrinking budgets and people have to implement more with less, and it's really a challenge. So what is printer logic all about? So our mantra, as you can see here, is we eliminate print servers. And what that does is greatly simplifies the printer management. We give you the ability to centrally manage a direct IP printing environment. And from a single console, you can manage your entire environment, thus eliminating the need for print servers in your environment. So we can print from any device to any device. And so we have solutions for Windows, Mac, Linux, and mobile devices as well. And we're going to go through a live demonstration here in a minute and show you exactly how this solution works. So our value proposition, as you can see from this slide, we've got a single instance of printer installer that deploys the printers out to the end users irregardless of the location that they're at. And then these end users then print direct IP printing to local printers. This allows them to, greatly simplifies the printer management. People are able to unplug the print servers, completely get rid of them because our solution centrally manages everything. It completely eliminates all the WAN traffic, and that single point of failure that you get with print servers is gone because you no longer need those print servers. We eliminate that need for scripting all GPOs because we can push out printers using our solution, and we're going to show you how that's done. And then we can greatly reduce the number of help desk calls because end users can simply install printers on their own instead of needing to call that help desk every time they travel from one location to the next. So before we jump into the live demonstration, just want to talk a little bit about a case study from one of our customers. Oklahoma City Community College is one of our valued customers, and they were having a lot of issues with printing. They saw our solution at a trade show, and they were interested in wanting to learn more about it. When we got on the actual demonstration, we always typically ask you, give us a little bit of information about your environment. And the IT director at that point mentioned that our printing environment is basically a bowl of spaghetti. It's a complete mess. Students have a difficult time as they move from location to location to be able to install printers. We have print servers that go down constantly, and just everything around printing is far more complicated than it needs to be. And so after evaluation and testing our solution, they implemented the solution, and they were able to actually eliminate all of the print servers in their environment. Now end users, as they travel from building to building on the campus, they can self-install printers on their own. They don't need to make that help desk call to be able to install printers, and it's just greatly simplified the way that they manage their infrastructure. So that's a little bit around kind of setting up the actual demonstration today. What we're going to do at this point is we're going to jump into a live instance of the software where Steve Kelley, our pre-sales engineer, is going to take us through the solution.
Perfect. Thanks, John. So from a technical standpoint, what I'd like to do is actually dive into a live instance of the software and show everyone exactly how it functions, how it fits in an environment. Now, the great news about Printer Installer, as John described, is it does require only one server to manage the entire printing environment. That one server will scale across multiple environments. We've worked with customers as large as 15,000 plus printers, and as customers as small as only 30 or 40 managed printers. Now, that one single server is set up in the customer's environment, so it is not a cloud-based solution this time. It is hosted on premise on either a physical or virtual server. Now, once we set up that server, there are really only three main components that make up the solution, which we'll be covering with everyone today. Now, first, there's an admin console. That is what everyone is seeing right now. This is the central location for IT staff members now to log in and be able to manage and control all those different printers that are out there. The second piece is that self-service portal page John described. This is a web page that is optionally configured for end users to now visit, so they're able to install printers on their own. This is a great way to reduce the help desk calls and the IT assistance that is required for end users to be able to print. The third and final piece to the solution is a simple agent. This agent is required to be installed on all the workstations or inside a virtual image. And what that agent is responsible for is simply taking care of all the heavy end lifting in regards to printer management. So anytime any changes are made by IT staff members inside the admin console, those changes are reflected on those individual print queues on the workstations. Now, as we described at the beginning of the call, Printer Installer's purpose is to eliminate your print servers, but still give you centralized print management for all your print queues. The way we accomplish that is by installing printers as direct IP printers. And utilizing that agent on each workstation, we are able to control those individual print queues. Now let's next talk about the implementation process, or how does that conversion process take place? How do we get users from their massive print servers and all their thousands of different print queues migrated over to Printer Installer? Now, it is very simple. We provide import utilities that allow you to import either from your Novell networks, your Microsoft print servers, or you can even import direct IP printers that are not managed by a print server at this time. Now, in either case, when we run those import utilities, what we're going to do is simply go out there and grab all the necessary information to duplicate that print queue within Printer Installer. Now, I'm sure it has taken many of your school districts years to set up and configure those printers. The great news is with Printer Installer, we use all that work that you've already spent and all that time that you've already dedicated to bring in those print queues the way they are currently set up. So things like the printer name and location and comment fields will automatically come over. We, of course, will grab the IP address of that printer. We'll even work with DHCP leased printers and utilize the host name if that is your scenario. And we'll even bring in all the current 32 and 64-bit drivers that you're utilizing. Now, one of the great benefits of Printer Installer is you no longer need to maintain separate servers for your 32 and your 64-bit environment. We do accomplish a holistic approach. We will manage all print drivers on the single server for both architectures. Even better, which is the case in most education environments, is you're not primarily a PC house. You are supporting both Windows and Linux devices as well as Mac OS X. The great news about Printer Installer is you now get to eliminate those CUPS servers. You get to manage print drivers and print queues all from our admin console, no matter how the end user is connecting from either a specific architecture or operating system. Now, once we import those print queues and their drivers, there's only one other step to get set up, and that is simply deploy that agent out there. Now, that agent can be automatically deployed through SCCM, using an MSI file, GPOs, login scripts, whatever your current network installation utility is, you will be able to silently push out that client or that agent without any user interaction. Of course, we provide a PKG for your Mac users and a Debian-based installer for those Debian-based Linux distributions. Now, the first time that agent runs on a workstation, what it'll simply do is look to see which printers your user has installed. If it detects those printers are now in our admin console, it knows it needs to assume management of that print queue from there on. Now, if that print queue was pointing to a print server, we know we need to convert it into a direct IP printer. So we make that change on the port setting of the workstation. Now, that whole conversion process is completely transparent from your end user's perspective. What that means is we don't change any of their print settings, we don't change the printer name, we will even leave their default printer alone at that time. So your users are none the wiser. They continue to print. They don't realize any big conversion has taken place. But in the back end, we have converted you to direct IP. That means you can now pull the pull the plug on your print servers. They're no longer needed. Printing will continue without any interruption. I do want to quickly talk about the benefits of eliminating that print server from a technical standpoint. The biggest benefit is we eliminate that single point of failure. Now, if you have a centralized print server and it goes down, of course nobody can print. But with our solution, even if the printer installer server were to go offline, that will have no disruption in printing at all. All your users will continue to print in that temporary outage. The other big benefit is we are eliminating print-related traffic that is now going through your WAN link. If you imagine the flow of a print job, it originates on a workstation. It goes through the WAN link to communicate with that centralized print server, comes back through the WAN link just to head over to that local area network printer. But as you can see, because we are installing direct IP printers on each workstation, that print job now travels from the workstation directly to the printer, eliminating that extra hop. So those are some of the architectural benefits of going with a direct IP printing environment. Now next I want to talk about some of the management benefits and how we simplify the way you're able to manage and control those print queues. One of the biggest topics and pain points for companies and school districts managing printers is driver management. Now we did see how Printer Installer imports your current drivers. That way we're using the ones that are already tested and functioning in your environment. But let's take a use case of a printer that is no longer functioning with a specific driver. We're getting a lot of help desk tickets created. We want to resolve those driver issues. Now, I may have printer 01 installed on 3,000 devices, but if I want to make a driver change, it's as simple as using our admin console. Using the drop-down menu, I can now transfer my users over to the PCL6 driver. Now, as soon as I make that change here in the admin console and click Save, our agent will intelligently do a check-in. It will see that, hey, for printer 01 that's installed, I now need to have this PCL6 driver assigned. It will automatically pull it down for that user and silently put it in place. This is a great way to make driver changes across the environment very simply. It's also a way to ensure that your users are always using the drivers that your IT department has tested, verified, and are assigning for use. Now, for any of the customers out there that may be dealing with sites that have a limited WAN connection back to the printer installer server, we give the great feature of setting up local caches. What that means is that those drivers will be stored on a file share on that local area network. So when a driver does need to be updated or pulled down, it will pull it from the LAN, not needing to communicate with the centralized printer installer server. Now, besides driver management, there's also a need to control and manage the driver settings. This is very applicable to the school environments. Now, schools typically will allow their teachers to print both black and white and color, but they want the ability to restrict users or students' ability to print only in black and white. So one of the use cases we see is setting up duplicate queues, where one queue will have a black and white only driver, and then this printer will be deployed to my students. Then the color version will be deployed to my teachers or any staff member who's allowed to print color. And that is one option. Another option is simply restricting it here in the driver settings. Now, when you restrict it in the driver setting itself, what we're doing is changing the default print settings. So I can say anyone printing to printer 01 needs to default to a grayscale. I also want to default them to a duplexing option. Now, the difference here is a user could overwrite those settings. They can select and choose to print a color job. Now, when they print, that job will render successfully. but I can check and revert them back to that default setting of grayscale or black and white the next time the user logs in. Or my favorite option is being able to default my users after each individual print job. So my students have the option to print color when they need to, but when they're not thinking about it, they're simply printing in black and white. So that is our driver and profile management. Now another key pain point is the ability to push printers and get them installed on our workstations. Now if you're familiar with printer deployments with print servers, there's a lot of group policy manipulation or scripting that takes place. Now we eliminate the hassle of messing with those configurations. We make simple printer assignments. So here in the admin console, on my deploy tab, I can just simply say I want to push this printer out to an Active Directory user or even an Active Directory computer. In this case, if a user has a printer assigned to them, they can walk around, log into any workstation, and that printer follows them. Great for your administrative or executives who may be traveling between different districts, but they'll have their home office printer follow them around. Now we can deploy to a computer object. This is more applicable to that lab environment where many students may be logging onto the same workstations, but those workstations need that classroom or lab printer always installed. We can also make simple group, OU, or container deployments, so you can deploy out that copy room printer to the entire faculty, all with 2 simple clicks. Now another unique way to deploy printers that is unique to printer installer is IP address range deployment. Now this allows schools to set up location-based printing based upon IP addresses. Very applicable to any of those environments that may allow students to travel and bring their home laptop into the environment. What we can do is assign one or multiple printers to automatically be deployed when that user joins that IP address range. So the user walks into the high school, they get the high school printers installed. Now when they leave that location, let's say they travel now to the middle school, we will detect that. We will remove the high school printers automatically for them and install the middle school printers upon arrival. So roaming users bouncing between buildings or even different floors do not have to worry about carrying multiple printers around, or they don't have to worry about mistakenly printing to a print device that they are no longer near. Now for anyone who has adopted a virtual solution such as a VDI implementation or a terminal server or published application, you'll be surprised to know that all these deployment assignments work even in those virtual scenarios. We are able to detect the IP address separately from that physical machine, separately from the server, so you can deploy printers even in a terminal session based on the user's physical location. Now deployment assignments, once they are set up, they are a great way to reduce IT staff's need to touch printing and to make sure those devices are installed. Our agent will always make sure that the user has the right printer at the right time. Now for any reason, if a user is traveling or they just simply do not have a printer they need, that is where our self-service portal page comes in. Users simply visit this web page. Now we have an option to either display the available printers in a list view, or we can even display them in a map. Great for your K through 12. Little Sally may not know what printer 09 is, but when she sees it here in her classroom, she is easily able to identify it. Then she simply clicks install and yes to install that printer on her own. Now from there on, the agent takes over. It takes care of the driver assignment, mapping the IP address, and configuring that printer for her use. It even takes care of any administrative access that is necessary. So your students or faculty that have lockdown GPOs or no local administrative rights, that is not a problem. This will work right out of the box, and they're still able to install printers on their own. Now this page is highly configurable. We'd commonly see the need to restrict what printers a student is able to install. This is my faculty printer that's in my faculty staff room. So when a student visits this web page, this printer is not available. We detect their OU. We make sure that printer is hidden, and they are never able to install it. Those are different ways we push printers out, and we're able to help users install them on their own, which will drastically reduce the need for IT assistance. Now, some of the other areas that we really help IT staff members manage their printers is also through queue management. Even though we've eliminated your print server, we still have a centralized view of all the print jobs that are being rendered and printed out. Each agent is reporting back to the printer installer server. Now, if a job is stuck for any reason, you will see the status, you'll see the user and the computer that that job is stuck on. Now, if we take a step back for a moment and think about the print server environment, if a job is stuck on a print server, that will impact all the users trying to print until that job is freed up. However, if a job is stuck here in Printer Installer, it is stuck on the user's local workstation, which means anybody else trying to use Printer 1 will continue to print successfully without any interruption or any IT assistance. Now, if we want to free up that one job, we just simply log in the admin console, select Delete, which will remove that job from that user's local spooler. Now, anyone dealing with terminal servers or a VDI setup, you can see how this is going to free up your Citrix team or your terminal server team. When a print job is stuck, they are the only users that have access to that terminal server. So in the past, it required their assistance to remove that job from the spooler. However, with our solution, even a help desk technician can quickly log in, select that job, and delete it, which will send that signal to the terminal server, freeing it up from the spooler, never requiring that terminal server team or the Citrix management team's assistance to get that job freed. Now, John also talked about the ability to monitor printers, make sure that they're available and up and online. Now, we aid in that in a few different ways. First is with our S&P status monitoring. So if help desk tickets or teachers call and complain about their printer being offline, you can quickly log in and see, well, it's simply low on toner, has a paper tray left open, or a paper jam. Now, if you want to be proactive about those printing concerns, we can set up S&P alerting. So you can trigger, or you can specify which error conditions will trigger email alerts. We do see a lot of K-12 and higher ed that will have their printers automatically alert their help desk ticket system anytime a printer is low on toner or low on paper. And then if it ever reaches a no toner or no paper status, that email will then get escalated to the help desk ticket manager. The next area I want to dive into is just the reporting and auditing. There is a need in K-12 and higher ed to be able to see who is printing what and where printing is being consumed. Now, the great thing about Printer Installer is we are able to obtain that information for you without any user interaction and without you configuring any department codes or special OUs. We leverage our agent that's installed just to simply watch where print jobs are going. So now we can break down printing, for example, based on each individual device. Now, we even include all those teachers directly attached USB printers. So not only are you seeing how much printing is going on with your MFDs, but those USB printers that are not networked, that are a lot of the time lost or unaccounted for, yet the most expensive ones to print to are now going to be accounted for through Printer Installer. We break down your black and white as well as your color and also give you a view of your grand total. We also have the ability to break down department-based reporting. This is a great benefit to the schools because now they can see how much their student is printing versus their faculty. For higher ed, you can now break down printing based on your different schools. You can see how much the business building is printing and compare it to your engineering department or the IT department. Now, besides department-based reporting, you can see your user-based reports. If you want to see if little Sally is a high-volume printer, you can see how much they are printing, both color, black and white, and total. And the last report I want to run for everyone is this records-based report. This is very applicable for any use cases where you need to verify if a print job was successful or hold a user accountable for a specific print job. We can show you the document name, the settings that were applied upon print, the printer is successfully printed to, as well as the user that submitted that job and where it fell, or where they fall within the Active Directory structure. Now, we also have the ability to run high-level overview reports. Now, these reports are for a different audience. These are generated for IT staff to now turn in to management or to the district level, who needs to see how printing is being consumed on a whole. So for the entire school district, you can see how much black and white, how much color, and how much total printing has gone onto any device. You can now show the district how many users you've supported in that time frame, how many devices you're supporting. You can even give the school a projection on how much printing is going to take place in that year based on their current print rates. Now this report will also include a bunch of charts and graphs that really make IT shine. They're able to now help management understand printing and the impact it's had in the printing environment. The last part of the core solution I want to quickly touch on is just our role-based access control. Now, because we are centralizing your print management across many different schools or maybe throughout the entire district, we do want to point out that there is the ability to segment who can manage which printers. Now, we do tie in with Active Directory, so you can segment these users out based on your current AD groups, and your users can log into the admin console using their current AD username and password. Now, the roles we have are first your administrators, which means that is a user who can make a change to a printer anywhere that it falls within the district. On the non-administrator side, we have our role of a manager. Our managers are able to make changes to their printers if they fall within their location, but if they fall outside of their location, they are not able to make any of those changes. And then our last role is our deployer. That's our help desk technician that's going to have a limited role. They're not able to change the way a printer functions, things like drivers, reassign the IP address, but what they are able to do is help their end users install and remove printers using those deployment assignments I showed earlier. This is our core solution, and as we can see, the ability to eliminate print servers is a huge proposition because you are eliminating that single point of failure. But you're also having the benefit of that single centralized management and ease and functionality of controlling the way those printers are installed. Now, Printer Installer and Printer Logic also have the ability to add on some advanced printing features. We have seen in K-12 and higher ed the need for BYOD and mobile printing. Now, the way Printer Logic handles mobile printing is quite unique and very efficient. What we do is set up a single pole printer. That pole printer is then installed on any mobile device that needs it. For your iOS devices, it's set up by just simply having a user join the network. We utilize DNS Service Discovery to have that printer installed as a native iOS printer for any device. For your Android devices and your Chromebooks, we can install that same pole printer. The only requirement is that those devices are enrolled in Google School apps. That way we're able to push out that printer without having the user to worry about any configuration on their end part. Now let's just hop over here to my end user's experience. Let's show them how a printing would take place on a Chromebook or an iOS device. So here on my Chromebook in my Chrome browser, I will hop over to, let's pull up the Gettysburg report, or Gettysburg address. Now as a student, I'm ready to print this out for my report. All I do is use my built-in print function of that Chromebook or that iOS device. There will only be one printer available for them. They simply select that print button. And what's going to happen is that job's going to render on that local Chromebook and be sent into the the Google Cloud printing environment. For your iOS device, it's going to navigate to the Printer Logic server. Now when an end user is ready to release that job, on a Chromebook, they simply select the Printer Logic icon. On an iOS device, they simply visit this URL. Now here they will be logged in with their Active Directory user, and they will see the print job that is now waiting for them to release. When they click the release button, they can either search for a printer, use a recently used one, or browse out to a specific device using the folder structure. Once they select that printer that they want that job to be pulled down to, that job will automatically be initiated. Now we have heard from higher ed and our 8 through 12 that this is a great solution. Our students love the ability to only have one printer that they're worrying about on their Chromebook, but they have the option to pull down that printer to any device. That means with your current printing infrastructure, you do not need to worry about buying AirPlay printers. You do not need to worry about upgrading those devices and making them Google Cloud capable. Our Printer Logic server will make sure that this functionality works on any printer in the entire environment. Now through K through 6, we've had concerns that users or our K through 6 students aren't able to understand the poll printing system. So we've come up with a great solution to accommodate those users, and it actually applies to anybody that wants the ability to automatically have jobs print out. What that means is if I would like to have a job automatically printed rather than go through the poll printing system, I simply log into this user self-service portal page, and here I can go set mobile printer. Now here for my user, I can say any job I print from a Chromebook or from an iOS device, rather than being held, I want it to immediately print to printer 1. Now any job I ever submit, either being it from an iOS device, a Chromebook, or Android, that job will immediately be rendered and started printing out on printer 1. So that wraps up the technical demonstration. It gives a pretty good high-level overview of the product. Now, I will wrap things up by saying that everybody's environment is very unique. It's one of the great benefits of my job as a system engineer is get one-on-one with each customer and design printer installer and make sure it implements and is addressing your specific use case and scenarios. Be it if you're dealing with a virtual environment or if you want a way to eliminate print servers but still centrally control and manage those print queues. We do offer a free proof of concept that allows us to get one-on-one with you and your technical support team and to help implement and design the product to fit in your specific environment. So I appreciate everybody sticking through the technical portion. I will turn the time back over to John. And then also I will stay on the line for the Q&A that will be proceeding.
Well, thanks, Steve. We greatly appreciate that. And as Steve mentioned, the proof of concept is a great way for you to look at the solution. There's absolutely no obligation. We give you 50 licenses to be able to test in your environment and a period of time to be able to basically completely see every aspect of how the solution can benefit your particular environment. So with that said, that's our presentation today. We now can open it up to any questions that you have, and we'll get those answered.
Okay, well, thank you so much, John and Steve, also for that live demonstration. That walkthrough was extremely helpful. I think everyone appreciated seeing actually how the product works. We have still about a little over 20 minutes left, so why don't we tackle a lot of questions have come in from the audience, so why don't we wade right into those. John and Steve, I'm not quite sure how you want to handle these. I'll direct them maybe to you, John, first, and then you can pass them over to Steve if you need to. But why don't we start with a question about rights and user privileges. Can you block individual users or particular groups of users from installing printers?
We absolutely can. Steve, you want to elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, the way we accomplish blocking users from installing printers is simply by utilizing those deployment assignments, which gives you the ability to specify if a user is getting a printer deployed by a OU that they belong to, an IP address range, or if they fall within a specific container. Now, if we're referring to the ability for a user's the ability to actually, on their device, go in there, create a queue themselves, and type in the IP address and then pull down their own driver. Printer Installer is not going to block that functionality, but that is something that is easily accomplished through your group policies. So your group policies can be restricted so users does not have the access to their printer console, and they will not have the ability to install printers on their own. So then the only way they are able to get a device is through your deployment assignments or through that self-service portal page.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. Now, I just wanted to come, you did have a schematic early on in the presentation showing how the software and the system talk to one another. Can you talk a little bit about the upload and download speeds required? What kind of network is needed to make this all happen?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first thing I want to highlight is, as we can see, because this is, most of the communication is taking place directly from the printer and the workstation it's originating from, then there's really no need for any additional network infrastructure that you currently aren't supporting. Now, the only communication that needs to take place from the printer logic server and your user's workstations is port 80 and port 443 and the ability to have that web page that is rendered. So as long as web pages are able to render and communicate over whatever link you're using, we will work in that scenario. Now, as we talked about drivers and profiles, how they are now going to be deployed from the printer installer server, we recommend that you simply have a connection big enough to be able to transfer your largest driver. Now, typically drivers, we do strip them so they're as minimal as possible. They're only going to be the INF file, which means they're about 3 or 4 megabytes big. Now, if network traffic is of concerns, I do want to highlight that we have the ability to set those local caches. So local caches will mean those drivers are pulled through the local area network. So to simplify, the answer is the network speeds should be accommodating of whatever current infrastructure you're supporting.
Okay. And what if you were to look at this on a broader scale? If a university, for instance, has multiple campuses, can the solution work out with remote sites and so on? Can you talk a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, it can. We currently support that one server managing multiple sites. Again, the only communication that needs to take place is over port 80 and 443. So as long as your firewalls are allowing that communication to take place, we are able to manage those printers that may be on a completely different campus than where the printer installer server is installed.
Right. Great. And coming back, and I know that early on in the presentation, in the demonstration, you did provide some indication of how the IPs from an existing setup might be transferred into the printer logic setup. Can you talk about, the question came in is, can the IP from a printer remain the same? Does it get assigned a new one? Can you revisit that for us, please?
Yeah, so to revisit the implementation and conversion process, we will absolutely use the exact same IP address that printer's assigned. Now, where we obtain that from is your print server. When a print job arrives at your print server, that print server knows the IP address of that printer and able to direct that job. So we copy that exact same information over to the printer installer server so that printer's IP or host name is being retained. Now on the end user's side, the way we make that change is using that agent. Our agent will now look at the printer installer server, see printer 01 does not need to point to a print server anymore. It needs to point to this IP address, and it will make that change for your end users.
And let's come back to, let's say someone decides to move ahead and install the printer logic system. Can you give us a sense of, how long does it take a typical customer to get up and running? Could they do this over a 2-week winter break, for instance?
Yeah, it's a very good use case is winter break. We had a company do a third-party survey with our customers who have implemented the solution in their environment. 80% of our customers responded back that they were fully functional within under 2 weeks. And that does include large enterprise environments that are managing over 10,000, 15,000 printers and hundreds of thousands of users.
Okay. Is there training associated with that, or how does that implementation take place?
Yeah, we absolutely include training with the purchase. If someone were to purchase our solution, we do provide full staff training for the life of that as well. If you have new staff members join, we can set up sessions to be able to train them as well. But we absolutely will work with the staff to train them on how to use the console. And quite a bit of the training takes place during the proof of concept. When we do a proof of concept with you, we'll work with you on a remote session and install the software with you on a server in your environment. And then we will spend, significant time with you, taking you through how to use the solution as well. So after that hour or so we spend with you on the proof of concept, you have a full working instance of the software in your environment and a very good working knowledge on how to use it.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for clarifying that. All right, let's move on to another question that came in from the audience is, if the internet connection is down, can you still print locally?
Yeah, that's a great way to point out and highlight the high availability of Printer Installer. Because those queues are installed as direct IP printers, there is no need for an internet connection or no need for connection between the workstation and the Printer Installer server. Even during those temporary outages or those network outages, users are going to continue to print without any interruption.
Right. All right. And what about printing via email? Does the system support the ability to print by email?
Absolutely. That's one of the great ways a lot of our customers in schools have set up guest printing. If guest printing is not the ideal goal, we can set up email printing and restrict it only to your email accounts, ones that are managed by the school. What happens is a user just simply submits a print job as an attachment to a printer logic specific email address that is going to be set up in your mail system. Now they are able to use the to field to direct that job. So as a user, if I want to print to printer 01, I just simply submit that email as printer01@eurodomain.com. That job is then going to be automatically printed out on that printer for that user to pick up.
All right, terrific. Thanks so much. I just wanted to come back briefly to some of the discussion of mobile and printing from mobile devices. I do recall during your presentation you showed how you could print from iOS and Android, and you also walked us through some of the with Google Chrome. There does seem to be some confusion about printing via the Google apps. Can you walk us through again how printing through a Chromebook, for instance, would take place?
Absolutely. I think it'll help if I share my screen again. So the way a user prints
while we're waiting for that, sorry, Steve. While we're waiting for that to load, besides iOS and Android and the Chrome, are there any other platforms that need to be accommodated, and which ones do you accommodate?
Yeah, for the mobile market, we hit the majority of the chunk of all devices between Chromebooks, iOS, and Android devices. We commonly get asked about Windows Surface devices. Those are the other major mobile platform out there. The great thing is any Windows Surface Pro is actually treated just like a regular desktop. Since it's got a full operating system on it, we just deploy out printers like we would to a regular Windows workstation. Okay. But for Chromebooks, Android, and iOS devices, everyone should now be seeing my screen. A user uses the built-in print function of a Chromebook. So right there in my Chrome browser, I have the ability to print. Now when I am able to print, I will only have one printer available to that user. So the user is not making any decisions. They just simply say, yep, Printer Logic Cloud Printer. They click the print button. Now what's happening in the back end, unaware of the end user, is that print job is now rendered on that Chromebook. It is sent off to the Google Cloud Printing System. Our Printer Logic server now has the ability to view into that cloud, Google Cloud Printing. They see a job, and they will pull that job down. Now, we will use the login user to see who that job belongs to. So I just printed this from my user account on my Chromebook. Now, if I jump over to my release page, you'll see that because my user submitted that job on the Chromebook, it is being held here for my user now to release. So I'm not seeing anybody else's print jobs. Now, when I'm ready to release that job, I simply browse out to the physical device I want. So I can now say I want this print job to be released to printer 08. Now, from a security standpoint, the benefit is a user is only seeing the devices they have been authorized to view. So students are pulling jobs down to student printers, but they are never able to pull down that print job to a faculty or a copy room printer. Now, as soon as I click select, you'll see that job is initiated and it is now printing out on that device. That is the most common way we see Chromebook printing taking place. Where the confusion might have come from is the second scenario that you have the option to implement, which you can think of as an auto release. Let's take the use case of our K through 6. A poll printing system may be a little more complicated for them to understand. So what we can do is actually set up a poll printer or a mobile printer to have those jobs automatically released without any user interaction. So once I set that printer, a user prints from their Chromebook, that job is going to immediately print out on printer 01. They do not need to visit the release page and pull that print job down. And if there's still any other confusion, or if any customer wants to actually see how the Chromebook end user experience works, that is where we do highly recommend getting set up on a POC. Seeing it here on a screen is one thing, but actually having your devices and opening up your Chromebook and seeing what it looks like from an end user experience is best accomplished in that POC.
All right, okay. All right, thank you, Steve. I don't know if it's just me or, but you sound as if you're breaking up a little bit right now. John, are you experiencing the same thing on your end? Are you able to hear Steve clearly?
Yeah, I also hear you breaking up a little bit as well.
Okay, all right. Well, I apologize for the audio quality. We will hopefully we'll improve as we go along. Why don't we come back to another question from the audience? We have about 7 or 6 minutes left, and a question about printer driver management. And someone in the audience says it's a big problem for us. How can PrinterLogic help with that aspect?
Well, one of the key areas is in driver management is the ability to centrally view and see those drivers that are being deployed. In a print server environment, you may have one server managing your 32-bit drivers, another server managing your 64-bit drivers. If you have a high availability print environment, you might have 7 or 8 servers that are housing all those different drivers. Well, as you can see with PrinterLogic, because it is all in one single pane of glass, any driver change or driver configuration will always happen in that admin console. There is no need to remote into multiple servers, make sure that they have the same changes applied. It is a simple 2-3 click process, and again, you have that high-level overview that is showing you your driver management for the entire printing environment.
Okay, great. And I want to come back to another piece of your presentation where you showed us how you could get reports on the number of users and which devices they were using and so on. Is it possible, maybe you could talk a little bit more about that, and is it possible to set limits on users as to how much they can print? And then might as well roll in another question that I saw from earlier on. Is it possible to link that to a charge system so people pay for their printing? Can you walk us through that again?
Yeah, so at this time we don't currently offer a quoting or the ability to set up quota limits and restrictions. That is a great feature that is in development that will come out in the future. I do want to quickly highlight just the benefits of Printer Installer because we do all of our own in-house development. We do take the suggestions and the market feedback from our current customers and future customers and develop those features upon request. Now, a lot of customers, once they have Printer Installer in their environment and they see that they are able to monitor, audit it, and report on what is being printed, they will use those reports to then set up bill back. So you can see how much the IT is printing. You can then assign different costs, your 2-cent cost for your black and white job, your 6-cent cost for your colored job. Then the ITs bill back for how much printing they've consumed in that time frame, and the marketing's bill back their specific printing that they consumed.
Okay. Well, thank you for explaining that. That helps a lot. And one other question from the audience that we have here is, can you integrate to MS Azure AD?
Absolutely. We have quite a few customers that we've helped set up that are hosting all this in Microsoft Azure.
Okay, great. And once again, I just want to come back to the idea of the audit trail. Is there an audit trail that you can see exactly what happened? I think that the same comes back to the reports we were talking about. But one of the users, one of the audience is interested in hearing about an audit trail. Is that the same thing as the kind of reports you were showing us before?
It depends on the exact need, but we show how we can audit and show the trail of a print job where it originates on a workstation, where it prints out, who submitted it. There's also administrative auditing if that's what the question is directed at. So you can see what IT users are logging in, what changes are being made to those devices, and when they were made.
Okay, all right. What about schools? I mean, a lot of schools and universities have green initiatives where they're trying to reduce the amount of paper being used in printing and so on. How does PrinterLogic help with green initiatives and trying to reduce the amount of paper?
Yeah, that's absolutely where we would point customers to our ability to set the default print settings. There are Gartner reports out there that show that 40% of print jobs are printed in color without that attention. So we can help reduce those 40% of colored print jobs by defaulting those users, for example, to black and white. We can also default users to that that duplexing option. So utilizing those default options, we help with those green initiatives, and then again, you can run those reports and see and verify that those green initiatives are in fact being met. You can see the reduction in colored jobs, the increase in your black and white. You can see the decrease in your single-sided prints, and actually verify that through the auditing reporting that those changes are having a positive impact.
Okay, all right. One other question here is from an institution that uses primarily iPads, do they need to purchase AirPrint printers with your product? Absolutely
not. With that single pole printer that I showed, it is the same pole printer that's being published through Chromebooks. We deploy that virtual printer out through mobile service discovery, which means that utilizing that pole printer, you can enable iOS printing on any physical device in the environment. It does not need to be an iOS printer. Great way to extend the life of some of those legacy devices, yet add a new feature to the environment.
Well, we have maybe time for one more question, maybe two if we make it quick, but obviously you sell to both schools and corporations and universities as well. So is there an education discount available?
Yeah, absolutely. We do offer education pricing. What we can do is anyone who's interested in getting a quote or seeing what education pricing looks like, we're more than happy to work with you to provide that information and get you that pricing.
All right, thank you. We will try and squeeze one more question in, and it's really more just sort of trying to understand the product a little more. you talked often about eliminating print servers, but aren't you, Printalogic, in the end, just a print server?
No,
Absolutely.
we are not a print server. Oh, go ahead, Steve. But no print jobs pass through our system, and Steve will elaborate a little bit more on that.
That's correct. As we showed, we are managing direct IP print queues. So those jobs are rendered on the local workstation. They're not being rendered on our printer installer server.
Okay. All right. Well, that is all the time we have left for today. Now, just for the audience, someone from the Printalogic team will follow up with all of you to get you some additional information. And if any of you ask a question that we were unable to get to today, someone will get back to you with answers for those too. And finally, I want to thank John Gibbs and Steve Kelley for really excellent presentations and that live demo. And I also want to thank Printalogic for its support. And one final reminder, we will send out an email to all attendees when the recording of the webinar is ready. Thank you again for attending today, and this concludes today's webcast. Goodbye.